In 2024, Jerry Seinfeld performed for thousands of admirers while cracking jokes. However, something had changed. His own kids no longer find his humor funny. When he tries to connect, they inquire, "Is that a bit?" He made a startling revelation on national television in 2014. He admitted to Brian Williams that he might have autism. He claimed that his brain functions differently. The indicators are becoming more obvious around age 71. He has become extremely fixated on routine. He is getting farther away from his family. You won't believe what's happening to the biggest star in comedy. Kalman and Betty Seinfeld welcomed Jerry Seinfeld into the world on April 29, 1954, in Brooklyn, New York, carrying a legacy that has been formed by tradition, exile, and battle over many centuries. Kalman, his father, was a sign painter who had escaped from Hungary following World War II. His sense of humor, however, was what truly made him unique. After serving in the war, he collected punchlines in a mental folder that he carried home, treating them like mementos. Kalman transformed meals into performances throughout supper, making the family laugh with observations and old army jokes. Jerry's mother, Betty, was of Syrian Jewish descent. Like many people who arrived from Ottoman-controlled Syria in 1917, her parents, Salem and Salah Hosni, were immigrants from Aleppo who registered as Turkish. This combination of ancient Middle Eastern tale and post-war Hungarian grime became the invisible stage into which Jerry was born. He and his older sister Carolyn grew up in Massapequa, Long Island, where comedy was not only accepted but also used as a survival tactic. An unremarkable suburban upbringing was given a legendary touch by his great-grandmother, G.Z. Dion, who descended from a rabbinic family that dated back to King David. Jerry never forgot his roots. They were profound but not theatrical. Cal Signs, his father's little business, was more than just a letter-painting company. It was a tranquil creative playground. Hours would pass while Jerry drew and joked about malfunctioning appliances or inquisitive neighbors. Spingwater was scrawled on one of his handwritten signs, "Not kidding," and gained popularity among consumers. A few even requested copies. Strangers' laughter was the kind of response that stuck in Jerry's head from a young age. It had nothing to do with applause. It was about spotting something minor and expressing it perfectly. Kalman continued to encourage his children to watch life, laugh at it, and perhaps even turn it into something useful at home. The fact that Cal signs were eventually mentioned on Seinfeld, years later in the Fusilli Jerry episode, was the subject of an inside joke in the family, similar to a secret fingerprint left by his father. Although Massapequa wasn't well known, it provided Jerry with all he required: quiet competition with Carolyn, dry humor, and the talent of picking up on little information that others missed. Jerry had an obsession with comedy at the age of 8, much like other children who have an obsession with baseball. Watching The Tonight Show late at night, he would imitate the timing and mannerisms of guests like Buddy Hackett, who soon became his hero. His bedroom became a private stage. He had a joke file, which consisted of actual handwritten notes with setups and punchlines that he practiced non-stop. He had already declared his desire to become a stand-up comedian by the age of 10. This was not a fantasy from childhood. It was a determined, nearly scientific endeavor. He would practice routines in front of the mirror. Before he ever stood in front of anyone, he adjusted his pauses, honed his sentences, and tested his own laughter. It wasn't adorable. It was getting ready. That emphasis was only honed in high school. He joined the theatrical club at Massapequa High, but he detested the scripts. He managed to improvise phrases, occasionally incorporating humor into somber passages. Instructors were annoyed. Students adored it. He included a line about cafeteria food in one school play, which had the audience laugh out loud on the first night. The plan did not include it. It became real because of that. He continued to do that, using comedy to rewrite life. He started performing at occasions even outside the school, gradually gaining the reputation of the man who never fails to make you laugh. That identity remained. He spent a summer in Israel on Kibbutz Sahar when he was 16 years old. It wasn't glamorous. Although it was labor, he was captivated by the diverse range of voices, ethnicities, and miscommunications he encountered. He recalled an argument between a Greek family over dishwashing methods and a Russian couple over a light bulb. It was very funny, because of the way they stated it, not what they said. This was preliminary content. He began to reflect more on how individuals from other worlds collide over the smallest things. He would later use such confrontations to create sets about restaurants, airports, and family vacations. However, it was merely a matter of curiosity at the time. His cultural identification was reinforced by family vacations centered around Jewish history sites, but also the subtle conflict between siblings. His older sister, Carolyn, received more attention. Jerry's only response was one of humor. He would refer to himself as the Seinfeld family's ghost or invisible son. These served as shields, not merely jokes. He discovered how to turn hurt, disappointment, and jealousy into disarming emotions. He would subsequently become known for this response, which transformed uncomfortable feelings into observant humor. It was the stew of emotions that shaped everything around him. Silent but strategic, ignored but observing, Jerry was captivated to SUNY Oswego's lakefront campus when he enrolled there in 1972, but he struggled with loneliness. In 1974, after 2 years, he moved to Queens College, which was nearer to the heart of New York's comedy scene. He had access to theater, communications classes, and most importantly, open mic nights, thanks to Queens. He earned a BA in theater and communications in 1976, but after class was when the true learning happened. In his junior year, he started sneaking into clubs like Catch, a Rising Star, where he watched pros and took notes and tested materials. In 1975, he had a disastrous opening set. He made unsuccessful attempts at jokes about aircraft meals. However, one of the more established comedians, Jay Leno, advised him to continue appearing. Yes, he did. He tried his jokes on both club patrons and classmates each week, keeping them in yellow legal pads that were maintained in big accordion files. He made jokes about mismatched socks, people who knock but don't wait, refrigerators in dorms, and how the cleanest one always had the most food stolen. These pieces were modest and unassuming, but they were genuine. He discovered that commonplace occurrences, mutual annoyances, and small customs have a greater impact than any joke based on hyperbole. His tone became more accurate and his timing improved. He wasn't simply another stand-up performer by 1976. He was a sight to behold. His father, Calman, encouraged him to pursue a steady career after he eventually graduated. Jerry made an attempt. He started working for a temp agency, lasted for a week. He was aware that this was not his purpose. He required that danger, that crowd, and that microphone. After quitting, he began to write more, hit open mics more seriously, stayed up later, bombed harder, and got back up. No contingency plan existed. He was motivated by his perseverance and readiness to endure discomfort every night. He wasn't pursuing fame. It was lucidity. Jerry Seinfeld entered the busy world of stand-up in 1976, with only 5 minutes of material and a lot of anxiety. The hazy confines of Catch a Rising Star, a New York club famed for giving unknowns a chance, were where he ended up. He barely made $50 from his first paid spots, and on some nights, he was left sleeping on a friend's couch. He barely had proper clothes, didn't own a car, and penned jokes about eerie stillness in elevators or strange roommate behaviors. However, he continued to perform, sometimes twice in a single evening, and other times for a group of 3 people. He developed a style with each performance that relied on precise observations made at the right moment rather than shouting or swearing. Club owners began to notice his act's accuracy by 1977. He had evolved from a mere comic seeking 5 minutes. Rodney Dangerfield then asked him to appear on an HBO special. Everything changed that one night. His name became well known outside of New York. When he entered a sitcom audition in 1980, just as things appeared to be improving, he was informed he looked too ethnic for the part. The rejection was painful, but he delved more into comedy rather than pursuing acting roles. Returning to Bud Friedman's improv club, he made the microphone his home. His sets tightened and sharpened. He made jokes about why people double-tie their shoelaces, cereal boxes, and airline food. He remained free because he refused to conform to a Hollywood mold. It enabled him to become the finest version of himself. He did a routine on marriage proposals during an evening performance at the Improv in January 1981 that left the audience howling. 10 more TV appearances ensued after a man buys a ring, nervously pops the question, and his pal says, "That's a nice ring, but it's not for me." He then appeared on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show in May 1981. Johnny laughed that night. The crowd leaned closer. America paid attention. He was no longer merely a New York comic after that. He was well known throughout the country. His face began to appear more frequently on late nights, with David Letterman in 1982. The pieces were snug. The laughter was genuine. He was still a struggling comic though. Checks for rent bounced. He pawned his own watch to pay the rent one cold night when he was about to be evicted. He remembered that moment. Later on, he claimed that it almost broke him. However, it also demonstrated his refusal to give up. Not with how far he'd come. Then 1987 arrived. For HBO, he filmed Stand Up Confidential. One advertisement caused the audience to wheeze when it ran on September 5. There was a genuine buzz. He was more than just a comedian to the producers. He received a syndication deal for that special, which paved the way for something greater. He met Larry David at a comedy performance that same year. They both loved the little things that people didn't notice. They stood around discussing why we always have too many buttons on our shirts, and how it always feels like a courtroom drama to run into someone you dated. That conversation turned into a pitch for a sitcom, with only the calm parts and no major storylines or dramatic arcs. NBC failed to get it. The pilot was lackluster, according to one memo. No one wanted to see more, according to the audience data. However, NBC executive Rick Ledwin was so convinced about the concept that he handed Jerry and Larry money from a Bob Hope special to produce 4 more episodes. In 1989, the Seinfeld Chronicles premiered on July 5th. It detonated. However, it wasn't the end. The program was renamed Seinfeld in 1990. Jerry started to distance himself from reality. He visited a soup business in New York. One day, when the proprietor threw patrons out for improper ordering, the episode became legendary, and that man became into the soup Nazi. You spread like wildfire. No soup for you. When Jerry made fun of him, the real Al Yane became enraged and once tossed him out of his shop. However, the program was successful because it was based on actual experience. Just enough exaggeration to make it amusing. Jerry desired more authority by 1991. He wanted to do more than just perform. He desired to write. It wasn't typical. He battled and prevailed, but stars didn't run their performances. Last-minute changes were made to the scripts. The episodes became strange. The audience adored it, but NBC was concerned. The ratings eventually soared into the top 10 in season 3. Everything has his fingerprints on it. At that point, it began to feel more like something new than TV. The show needed balance, even if Elaine wasn't included in the first idea. Julia Louis-Dreyfus arrived. She talked a little bit about uncomfortable aircraft restrooms during her audition. The script didn't call for it. She made do. It was sealed at that time. She had the beat of Jerry. She was a perfect fit. The competition was broadcast in 1992. A wager on who could avoid touching themselves for the longest. But they never mentioned it. They danced around it instead. Euphemisms such as master of my domain become popular phrases in society. Actual competition between Larry David and his buddies served as the basis for the episode. 18.5 million people saw it for the first time. It reached 20.1 million when it was re-aired. It became TV Gu's greatest episode ever, and won both an Emmy and a Larry. Only 31 people voiced their complaints in spite of the taboo. Jerry insisted on being genuine. Tom's Restaurant at 2880 Broadway served as the model for the cafe in the television series Monks. The interior was reconstructed in Los Angeles, while the exterior was recorded in New York. A writer's strike in 1993 almost put an end to it. Jerry relied on his stand-up abilities without any scripts. The group made do. The show's tone became more relaxed and authentic. It came to life with that hit. George Costanza became a phony marine biologist. In February 1994, he pulled a golf ball out of the whale's blowhole to preserve it. Hours before the shoot, that story came complete. Jason Alexander was given 30 minutes to commit the last monologue to memory. That following morning, Jerry gave me the golf ball component. In syndication history, it became one of the most rewatched episodes. Seinfeld was negotiating $1 million each episode by 1998. He became the most paid TV actor as a result. Producing each episode of the show might cost up to $3.5 million. Including syndication, his personal haul brought in $267 million. He didn't coast, though. He pushed every detail, molded every episode, and taught writers. On May 14, 1998, the last episode was broadcast. 76.3 million viewers were present. For violating a Good Samaritan legislation, the group was imprisoned. It was despised by critics. Supporters were split. Each 30-second commercial spot cost $1 million. It didn't matter if there was a loud backlash. It was the end of the run. TV had already been altered by the show. Jerry made an additional $267 million that year from syndication after it finished. He made about $1 million for each replay. He didn't perform in any further shows. Rather, he resumed his tour. His gigs sold more than $100 million in tickets between 1998 and 2000. Even still, fans gathered to hear him dissect cell phone oddities and cereal boxes. Jerry was accused of copying a joke by comic Bill Kirstenbauer in 1999. It has to do with airplane peanuts. They reached an out-of-court settlement. Jerry then indexed more than 40,000 jokes in legal pads for his own protection. Then followed a documentary in 2002 about him starting over and reconstructing his act. It revealed a weakness. Jerry became anxious as well. Even Jerry had self-doubt. He provided the voice of an animated bee in 2007. Bee-Bomb earned $287 million. The format was entirely fresh, but the jokes were quintessential Seinfeld. It was ridiculous, lighthearted, and surprisingly effective. Watching a sitting U.S. president get into a 1963 baby blue Corvette Stingray, as if it were any other morning, was an odd sight. But when Jerry Seinfeld pulled up outside the White House gates in December 2015 to film the most talked-about episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, that's exactly what occurred. Never hitting a public street was the plan. They made a slow circuit of the White House grounds, but the Secret Service wouldn't have it. One rather surprising combination of pop culture and politics. 2 coffee cups, and 2 significant icons. Barack Obama remained unflinching. He made fun of how children adored him, saying that those between the ages of 0 and 8 thought he was comical. Jerry chuckled as he went along, slipping in jokes about football and healthcare, while navigating curves with the cool assurance that only a comedian could project alongside the head of the free world. The entire situation seemed too easy to be true. Nevertheless, more than 52 million people watched it. Instead of the stuffy interviews or prepared lines that some had anticipated, they received lighthearted conversation, coffee sips, and even a reference to Between Two Ferns. The White House was transformed into a comedy set for a single, fleeting trip, and everyone was laughing. Fans were caught off guard by something else 2 years later. When Jerry Before Seinfeld debuted on Netflix in 2017, it wasn't your typical special. In this case, time was reversed. Jerry was standing on the same tiny stage in the New York comic strip, where he had first performed jokes in 1976. His early gags were piled on top of yellow legal pads from the mid-1970s. Notebooks that appeared to be artifacts became still effective jokes. In one joke, left-handed discrimination was mocked. Why Superman wore his underwear outside his pants was another question. The audience laughed even though some of them were so basic, they felt like warm-ups. The humor wasn't the only thing that surprised people. It was that Seinfeld had held on to the pads for more than 4 decades. The audience wasn't merely taking in a performance. They were witnessing someone, well aware of his progress, return to the starting line. There was no need to polish the early material, home videos, or childhood images. The fans could sense that they already had a purpose. Broadway followed. Even the critics were taken aback by that one. Seinfeld joined the musical comedy The Betrothed in 2019, which had already seen over 1,000 performances. He wasn't acting, though. He appeared as an unexpected visitor, taking over the microphone in between scenes and transforming pre-written sequences into something untidy and vibrant. He questioned those in the audience about the strangest wedding-related incidents. Then he disagreed with their responses. No safety net, no filter. That was not the purpose of Broadway. The majority of actors followed the script. Jerry was indifferent. He blended the tumult of stand-up with the cadence of musical theater. A few people came to the theater only to see him. The popularity of the ad-libs led to the show's extension. It wasn't even about the plot at that point. People came to watch what he would say next. Everything stopped when the pandemic struck in 2020. Jerry, however, did not. With 23 hours to kill, a Zoom stream spectacular that resembled stand-up, reimagined for living rooms. He went virtual. He only had a camera, a silent stage at the Beacon Theater, and pre-recorded laughter that was woven in to maintain the beat, no actual audience. The cost of the tickets was $25. People paid a lot of them, even if it might have appeared high for a stream. $20 million was made from the special. Family members stepping on each other's nerves in quarantine and dead phone batteries were among the jokes. He managed to make the jokes land somehow, even without a room full of faces. In order to demonstrate that comedy didn't require a stage if the voice was clear, he even included scenes in which viewers engaged from their screens. This served as a warning to the industry. Seinfeld had demonstrated that you could draw arena-level crowds, with simply timing and tone and no seats or venue. Then Unfrosted, who no one had anticipated, appeared. The film, which was made available on Netflix in 2024, took something as simple as the creation of Pop-Tarts and turned it into a fully realized fictitious corporate criminal tale. Cereal giants fought in this version. The host attempted to pilfer Kellogg's schemes. A rogue scientist, sabotage, and even steam pressure-induced toaster explosions occurred. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. The fact that 50 million people saw it in the first 7 days was what counted. By fabricating a congressional hearing and making a kitchen snack into a national emergency, Seinfeld emphasized the ridiculousness. It was a mockumentary that distorted history till it broke. On the inside, though, it was a masterclass in narrative. He created a spectacle out of a moment that most people had never given much thought to. The actual details served just as a springboard. The rest was all invented, and it was successful. However, his life wasn't always humorous. Seinfeld met Shosanna Lonstein, then 17 years old, in Central Park in June 1993. He was 39 years old. She was still a high school student. That year, they began dating. There was little outcry when they appeared on the cover of People magazine in 1994 with the title, "Look Who's in Love." Curiosity was aroused. Seinfeld said to Howard Stern that he was unaware of her age. He did not, however, dispute that the connection began prior to her becoming 18. She transferred to UCLA from George Washington University. It ended 4 years later, but the 22-year separation persisted. At that time, the timeline caused a stir. Even now, it still does. Then June 1998 arrived. Jerry got to know Jessica Ackler. She and Eric Netherlander had just returned from their 3-week honeymoon. Jerry and Jessica met at a Manhattan gym. Netherlander filed for divorce after 4 months. He said that Jessica had deceived him. He claimed to have been duped and taken by surprise. He gifted her Italian clothing valued at $25,000. It didn't matter. By late 1999, she was engaged to Jerry. Even though they have 3 kids and have been together for more than 25 years, that beginning still haunts them. It was disorganized. It happened quickly. It was genuine. Jerry said something odd to Brian Williams in November 2014. He said he had a feeling that he might be on the autistic spectrum, but had not received a diagnosis. He claimed to be literal, to think on a long-term scale, and to be perplexed by small chat. He was commended by others for raising his voice. Others cautioned against diagnosing oneself. It was debated by autism groups. For fans, however, it made sense. His accuracy, manner, and fixation on routine all made sense. He made no label claims. He simply said that his brain functioned differently. Then, on the red carpet in 2017, he declined to give Keisha a hug. Arms wide, she approached. He retreated 3 times. Embarrassed, she left. Later, he informed reporters that he dislikes giving strangers hugs. The video became viral. Memes went viral. He was described as rude by some. He was only being himself, according to others. It was appropriate for the story. The moment was under Jerry's control. He does it every time. Unless he is the one causing the commotion, he dislikes it. His Seinfeld Foundation has subtly contributed millions to child welfare and autism research since 2001. He made an anonymous donation of $5 million in 2020. Some claimed it was real. Others claimed it was to improve his reputation, following the remarks made by Spectrum. In any case, the money had an impact. He never discussed it much. He didn't have to. It was a component of an intricate legacy. By 2025, that legacy will be worth at least $950 million. He's already a billionaire, according to some. Reruns of The Seinfeld Show continue to air daily, even though it ceased in 1998. Over $4 billion was made through syndicated trades. 15% of the back end is owned by him. Netflix paid $500 million for the streaming rights in 2019. Money falls into Jerry's account each time an episode airs somewhere. Tens of millions more are added by stand-up tours and comedians on cars getting coffee. Shows are not the foundation of his wealth. Repetition is the foundation of it. He published a book titled Hall of Fame in 2024. It was full with gags that were never performed on stage. On yellow legal pads they all scrawled. Some dealt with mortality and others with aging. Hallmark cards with nothing written on them were ridiculed. The term yada yada was used by another. The fact that they weren't throwaways was shocking. They were acerbic. They simply never had their chance. The joke graveyard and nearly lived concepts were visible to fans. They were all still important to Jerry. He has been mentoring emerging comics since 2022. He demonstrates to them how one 1976 Superman joke required 80 revisions. He teaches compression, requiring at least 3 revisions for each joke. Every day he writes one joke, he marks it with an X on his calendar. Most people die. The good ones come to the top. His method is not magical. Math is involved, it's muscle. Hours have passed. He disclosed a parenting failure in 2023. His grown children don't find him funny. Is that a bit when he talks? They wonder. The best moments aren't on vacations, he replies. The 3 poison peas are eating cereal at 11 p.m. when he calls for praise, pleasure, and problem solving. He doesn't strive to be a flawless father, saying, kids need struggle, not perfection. He simply appears gradually. He is currently in 2025, getting ready for a world tour in 2026. Laughing Matters is the name of it. Tickets are sold out in 30 cities. He will discuss aging, artificial intelligence, socks, and the fact that nothing truly changes. AI can't compose a sock joke, he claims. Most likely, he is correct. It will be a high-tech stage. There will be unexpected visitors.